What makes knowledge forbidden? Today we have the introduction to our third and final main protagonist in the Tales of the Last series, Alyaska. A young boy stood in shallow water tying underwater plants together as a rectangular garden floating on the water began to slowly drift away from the others like it. Upon finishing the knot, he noticed the section he secured tearing away from an unsecured section. His brow furrowed for a second before he grabbed a nearby rope and tied a loop on both ends. He then used it to lasso a pole sticking out of the drifting garden and used the other end to lasso the pole of a garden that was still in alignment. He rushed to the edge of the drifting garden that was closest to land and swiftly used his finger to draw a circle with runes in it. With a new smile on his face, he hopped to dry land and drew a near-identical circle in the dirt nearest the drifting garden. Once complete, the two circles flashed. The boy then proudly put his hands on his hips, beaming with delight, while the drifting garden moved back into alignment with the others around it. With his goal now complete, he dried his hands with a towel laying nearby.
Alyaska?
A woman's voice called from the distance near a farmhouse, causing the boy to come running. When he finally found her, she held out a book titled The Battle of Hecate, the Last Sorceress, which he initially ignored in favor of hugging the woman, to which she gladly returned the hug.
Where have you been, Hallie? I thought you had gone to return your book only to find it sitting on the counter.
Sorry, Mama. I saw one of the two numbers was coming loose, so I fixed it with a link circle.
You definitely got your circle intuition from your father. I can't remember a single one of those patterns you both draw.
She handed him the book.
Now hurry and return your book before you wind up being late for lunch. And don't forget to wash up before you eat.
Thanks, Mama. I'll be back faster than a circle activation.
He started running even before finishing his sentence. She watched as her son ran into town.
Ay, mi niño está creciendo demasiado rápido.
He rushed to the nearby town. Once he arrived, he took a moment to catch his breath. Suddenly, he was lifted off the ground by the collar and moved to the side of the road, and a carriage passed by the spot he was in on the road.
Doing your best stop sign impersonation again, Al?
Allie turned around to see the styled man of muscle that moved him.
I would have seen them coming, Comer.
The only things you see are in your magic books, Al. And I somehow doubt their common carriage made it into one.
Well, you don't know because you don't read them.
That's quite all right, Al. You have your magic books, and I have my cabbages. Or here's a thought. You keep off magic until you're old enough to use it.
Dad says I can use it, as long as I only use circle magic.
I don't doubt your father, but you are tempting fate, Al. Many people lose their lives to magic every day. What would your parents think if they found out your shapes turned you into some kind of...
He turned around, noticing a dog napping at a nearby storefront.
some kind of dog-kid hybrid?
We don't have inscriptions for a hybrid circle.
A figure walked by in a large hat and strangely decorated robes. With a snap of his fingers, 6 metal balls flew from his pocket and picked up some produce while he looked over the meat selection. Allie watching the show in amazement, all the while as Comer returned to his station. The man spoke. "Don't be so sure. We're finding more rune sites than ever before. Perhaps soon we'll find an inscription for fusion, so keep your writing hand honed and double check before you seal your circles." While he spoke, he paid Comer for his purchase and stacked the food on top of the steel balls. Comer leaned over to the stranger and whispered,
Sorry to bug you, but could you not use magic in front of the kid? He's a little addicted to learning it.
The stranger then walked over to Allie, kneeled, and put a hand on his shoulder. if you tried to use magic of the body before you turned 13. A rabid rhino leopard will sprout from your kidney and eat you alive! Allie fell back in fear. He stared at the stranger with wide eyes as they elegantly stood up, dusted themselves off, and walked away with the steel balls carrying his purchase next to him, while giving a flick of his hand as a farewell. Allie sprung to his feet.
Who was that? How do you do that metal thing? Where's he going?
Don't know. Don't want to know. And you do not need to know.
Alyaska went to follow him, but was quickly caught by Comer.
Oh, no, you don't. That stranger's probably here on Mr. Force business and you can't be bothering him.
Mr. Force? That sounds so cool. I have to know what he does.
No, you don't.
Alyaska tried to run after the stranger, but Comer heaved him onto his shoulder, and then went to resume his daily rounds while Allie struggled.
You're too curious for your own good, Al. You have years before you're old enough to do that meta stuff. You shouldn't do kid stuff like games and crushes and reading. How about I let you borrow one of my older books, huh? I got an old one rumored to be from Earth. It's rumored to be about a football player with hearing loss that beat all the odds. I know you love hero stories.
Allie's struggle stopped, and he sighed.
You're right, Comer. But will you tell me what he did if he comes back again?
As long as you promise me you won't try to do anything I tell you about. Deal?
He set Alyaska down.
Deal. And can I borrow your book after I return this one?
Allie held up his book.
I'll go get it right now for you.
Comer quickly left through a door in the back of the building.
Awesome! I'll be right back for it.
Alyaska hurried out the door, whispering under his breath.
Lo siento, Comer. Tengo que ver qué está haciendo.
Allie raced through the streets, quickly finding the stranger. He then started keeping at least 3 food stalls of space between himself and the stranger. The stranger continued his walk through town, stopping for nothing else and seemingly never so much as giving a glance to any of the people or items. Soon he had left the bounds of the town, causing Allie to stop when he noticed where the stranger was going.
El bosque de Hadas? Está loco por ir allí.
Allie then started following the stranger a little closer. At the edge of the forest, the stranger knelt and started drawing in the dirt while Allie hid behind a nearby rock. There he listened to the stranger drawing. All the while he quietly twiddled his thumbs, his mind racing with what the stranger could be doing. Once the sound stopped, there was a brief silence. Allie quickly went to climb the rock, but before he could reach the top, he heard rustling from the other side and stopped mid-climb. The rustling also stopped for a moment. Then, he heard the sound of dirt being moved, followed by footsteps. He rushed over to the rock to see what the stranger did. They were walking into the forest, leaving behind a magic circle that they had drawn in the dirt, and then destroyed beyond repair.
¿Por qué no traje un lápiz?
Allie stared at the circle while the footsteps became more distant. He clenched his fists, and with a grunt of frustration, left the circle to continue following the stranger. The stranger strolled leisurely while Allie dashed from trees to rocks and back again, causing enough noise to make a few birds fly away. And yet, the stranger didn't turn around. However, a few sparks of light descended from the canopy towards the stranger.
No. ¿Quién sabe qué le jalan las hadas?
Ellie hurried towards the stranger with the stealth of a wild boar. To his surprise, the stranger held up some cloth, causing Allie to stop in his tracks, and partially hide behind a nearby tree as the sparkling lights started to circle the stranger. The lights faded, revealing fairies in leaf clothing excitedly flying around the stranger. He separated the cloth, revealing outfits that fit the fairies, while talking to them just out of earshot of Allie. He watched as the three fairies happily took the clothes the stranger handed them. In a flash of light, the fairies changed into their new clothes, and the stranger started talking again and motioned in Allie's general direction. Allie dove completely behind his tree. His breathing became faster, and he started feeling cold. As he sat leaning against the tree, his mind racing faster than his breath all the while.
¿Me delato? No había forma de que pudiera oír lo calado que estaba. Tengo que conseguir.
Allie froze when he felt something land on his head. The feeling soon rolled forward to his forehead, and then he spotted the reason. A fairy draped itself on his head and was now looking him in the eye upside down.
You feel like a kindred soul. Can we play?
I can't. I'm really sorry.
You look pale. Are you alright?
The fairy flapped its wings and lifted itself off his head to float in front of him.
I just need to go somewhere. Please, if you'll let me, fairy.
He lowered his head and began to shake.
But I don't want you to leave. I can't stop you from leaving because of our deal with the bigger one. We could have so much fun together. If you want.
The fairy excitedly flew around him, causing a sparkling trail of light to fall on him like snow, before the fairy landed on his lap.
My name is Amika. Right, what's your name, little one?
Amika's eyes began to give off a slight glow, and every fiber of Alyaska's body urged him to not respond. But his mind recalled his books. He gently picked up Amika, causing them to giggle, until he set them down on a particularly large leaf on the ground. He then stood up and turned away from them.
I'm sorry. I have something that I have to do.
With all the courage and strength he could muster, he shakily ran in the direction he last saw the stranger going in.
Wait, there's no time for play. We're just a few minutes and then you can be underway. Please. You should make time for play while you're young, you know.
He ran until Amika's voice faded away. When he finally stopped, he saw the stranger walking not far ahead of him, and then promptly fell over from overexertion. After a quick break to catch his breath, while watching the stranger move at a rather slow pace, he caught up to his regular stalking distance from the stranger. The stranger approached a glade in the forest. It was then that the stranger held his hands in the air lazily and approached something. A large dragon was laying on its side, struggling to breathe on the other side of the glade. Allie's eyes widened at the sight unfolding in front of him. Between the stranger and the dragon was a young woman with a pink flower in her hair. She held a spear pointed at the stranger. As the stranger approached, the woman's expression changed from fear to joy. The stranger dropped his hands, and the 6 balls that brought the meat they were carrying next to the dragon's mouth. Allie snuck closer to hear them while the woman was preoccupied talking with the stranger. He struggled to keep his balance while avoiding stepping on loud grass and twigs, but he managed to find a hiding spot within hearing range between a large rock and a sturdy tree with some fallen twigs around it, and positioned himself to peek over the rock. The woman and the stranger kneeled next to the dragon as the woman pet the creature. "Tell me everything that happened since you arrived. Try not to miss details." The stranger dragged his hand over the dragon's scales while his hand lit up with different colors.
We were up to carry out our mission. We sat down far from settlements to avoid unwanted attention, and everything seemed normal when we set up camp. Well, except a breeze that Tofa saw smelled like rotten eggs, so we decided to pack up and keep looking. We even saw a pitcher plant that reminded me of that time when we were kids and you got stuck in
Amante! The stranger's hand in Totvis's chest glowed with a green hue.
Bonnet, you said don't miss details. Do you need them or not?
The stranger got up and moved to Totvis's face, watching it closely. Relevant details. The environment, Totvis's behavior, how you've been, etc. Amante let out a smile.
You could have just asked.
I did ask.
That is not what I meant, and you know it, Mally.
Malvado.
Mally?
He smirked. Fine, Amy. Get Tot to open up. She smiled warmly while tucking a lock of hair behind her ear before placing a hand on the dragon and closing her eyes. The dragon opened its mouth just as Malvado cupped his hands in front of it. Allie leaned more on the rock, seeing nothing in Malvado's hands. But soon after, a breeze shifted into the area. A faint green spark appeared in Malvado's hands, then more began to emerge from the dragon's throat. As it did, Malvado used one hand to start drawing in the dirt, while the other continued collecting the green sparks. While the sparks in his hand grew, it started to form a strange shape not unlike a rune in a magical circle. The wind grew stronger, causing some trees to sway. However, Allie's gaze refused to leave Malvado's hands. Once the sparks had collected and formed, Malvado immediately removed his hand and finished the circle in one smooth movement, causing the wind to abruptly stop. The dragon immediately got up with a quick cough and looked around before being hugged by Amante and calming down soon after. The green light floating in the magic circle started moving of its own accord, bouncing off the bounds of the circle. Allie leaned further on the rock, trying to get a closer look. But then, he slipped off the rock and landed on a large fallen twig, snapping it in half loudly. Before he could react, Amante noticed, formed a spear out of nearby rocks in her hand with just a flick of the wrist, and hurled it in Alyaska's direction, pinning him to the tree by his clothes. Fear took hold of him as he desperately tried to pull the spear out of the tree. Amante watched him with a confused look on her face. I see your Dracophos talents remain sharp, but I would appreciate it if you didn't lower the local child population. Malvado crossed his arms. Amante looked to Totvis, who nodded to her before eating the meat that Malvado brought. Amante then ran to Allie.
I'm sorry. I didn't think any children would be here.
She quickly pulled the spear out of the tree before pulling Allie in for a tight hug, barely allowing him to breathe. After a moment, she took a step back and began to examine him.
Do you have any ouchies? Did the Fae do anything to you?
I'm fine.
I think
you.
I brought some bandages. No, they're back at camp.
Amante! He is fine. I made sure the Fae wouldn't take him by making an offering.
You brought a child to a Fae forest.
I didn't bring him. He followed me. Amante glared at him as a spear made of rocks rose out of the ground. I went pick up supplies for you, and on the way he became curious about my magic and followed me. I noticed it in time to make sure the fairies wouldn't harm him. Does that suffice? Her glare switched to a smile.
Perfect. Thank you, Mally.
She then turned her attention to Allie.
What's your name, sweetie?
I'm Alyaska.
Malvado looked at Allie surprised, yet said nothing.
Alyaska. It's dangerous for children like you to go into a Fae forest. You could be taken from everyone you love forever. Do you have any family, sweetie?
I do. And I know it's dangerous, but I had to know what Mally was here to do.
Malvado! A small chunk of meat knocked Mally's hat off his head. He looked in Totvis's direction just as the dragon returned to eating the meat, pretending it never did otherwise.
Sorry, sweetie, but could you call him Malvado? Mally is a private name I call him.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you tell me what Malvado's here for? Please?
Oh, how could I say no to those eyes? Okay. Tot and I fell out of the sky and Tot refused to move. So I sent a distress call to the Mista Force to help us solve the problem. And Mally the Grouchier came and helped Tot feel better.
It was just a rogue wind sprite. It was likely attracted by the dragon's breathing and decided to feast on the source. The circle will likely only feed it for a few hours, so I suggest you leave soon and I will walk Alyaska home.
No, Tothis and I will take him home since we'll be safer.
Malvado opened his mouth, but said nothing.
Excuse me, but can I go with Malvado? Please?
Oh no, not the eyes. I can't, sweetie. I couldn't live with myself if anything happened to you on your way home.
Amante easily lifted Ali off the ground, much to his surprise, and carried him to Totvis. After all these years, you doubt my ability to handle the Fae?
Remind me, why does your voice sound like that, Mally?
Fair enough. Malvado walked up to Amante and Ali while she was setting Ali on the dragon's back. Ali's unease only grew as the dragon's movements while eating rocked him on its back. Will you be okay from here? Amante climbed onto Totvis's back and positioned Ali to sit on her lap.
Oh, so now you're doubting the skills of a member of the Draco Force?
Malvado's eyes quickly darted to the wind sprite and back to Amante. I'll be staying in the nearby town a while longer to get some rest before I leave the planet. I'm a little winded. He then turned around and began walking away. Amante's grin grew, and so did Ali's concern.
Wait! I know I'm not old enough to use body magic, but can you teach me so I can do it when I'm older?
He stopped suddenly. Teaching an underage person body magic is illegal on most planets in the galaxy, and highly immoral. I could never risk a child like that. Ali deflated, and his eyes began to well up. However, it seems this world has a palpable library system that likely has elemental fundamentals. If one were to study enough to send in a child prodigy application when they turn 13 and pass the test, they can enter the Mr. Force Research Division earlier than most by being assigned a mentor. But I ramble to myself far too often. Malvado looked over his shoulder at Ali and Amante. I trust you two didn't hear anything?
Oh, sorry, Mally. Did you say something? We didn't hear anything. Did we, Alyaska?
Ali looked at both of them and started radiating joy.
Yeah, we didn't hear anything anywhere.
Amante tickled Ali with a hug, and Malvado started to walk away with a smile.
Thank you, Malvado.
Malvado looked back to see the smiling faces of Amante and Ali, while Totvis stared back at him, still chewing the last of the meat.
Oh, that reminds me. There's still the matter of your payment, Malvado.
It will be taken care of when you report in as usual, unless something is the matter.
You'll get the usual payment for helping, but I also have something special for you today. If you'll allow, that is.
She motioned for Malvado to come closer. Well, I do appreciate a good paycheck. I thank you for your generosity. When Malvado reached them, Amante leaned towards Malvado and used her hand to cover Allie's eyes. However, he heard a soft sound similar to the one he'd hear when both of his parents are around. When she removed her hand from his eyes, she was slowly returning to her upright sitting position on the dragon as Malvado slowly backed away. They shared a smile and didn't take their eyes off each other for a moment.
It was past due, and this felt like the right time.
She wrapped her arms around the confused Allie and put her chin on top of his head while making a pouting face.
And if I wait for you to give a cue, we might waste the rest of our youth.
Malvado looked once more to the sprite, then turned and walked away. Concern overtook Amante's face.
I'm coming to see you after I take Alyaska home, okay?
Malvado nodded, but kept walking and was soon out of view. Amante buried her face in Alyaska's hair, and the dragon let out a low rumble, unsettling Alyaska.
Oh, I messed it up.
The dragon brought its head around to look at the two of them, causing Alyaska to freeze in place. Totvis exhaled a gentle wind from its nostrils that carried the scent of lavender. Amante let out a sigh, then raised her head.
Thanks, Tot. We can go now.
Totvis unfurled its wings, and with one mighty flap of its wings, the three of them rose to the treetops. Amante held Alyaska tightly, keeping him firmly in front of her. When his hair finally settled from the wind, he saw the treetops spread for miles like a lush, green carpet.
Alyaska, I need you to promise me something.
He leaned his head back to look up at her, giving him a warm smile, and Totvis brought their head around again.
Promise me you won't lose yourself in your studies and forget the people around you?
A super promise.
She ruffled his hair.
Good.
She held him tighter with a light tickle, and he giggled.
Now just point Tot in the right direction and then hold on tight.
He leaned forward and pointed at the library spire, standing taller than the tree line.
That way!
Totvis reared back, and with a beat of its wings, they were off. When they sat down at the library, Alyaska quickly jumped off and ran to the building, waving at the Draco Force duo.
Thank you, Miss Amante. Thank you, Totvis.
You're welcome, and don't forget our promise.
In an instant, Totvis flapped its wings and took to the skies again. Alyaska ran to the front desk and set his book on it.
I'm returning this. I need everything on the Mystiforce.
Amante and Malvado sat on the inn's roof, looking out at the sunset, while Amante leaned on him.
So, what changed your mind about taking on a student?
If I didn't, you'd pester me about leaving a child to their own devices. I already have a royal family just short of demanding I teach their daughter when she becomes of prodigy age. And it reminds me of that time, too. A smile made its way across her face.
Arya and Sen will be proud, just like I am.
If Arya ever finds out. I haven't seen or heard from her since we all went to the mourning of her only student. Sen told me he's about to take on a second student, and even he can't reach her to tell her the news.
The Arbormage student and teacher bond is strong. She's probably mourning in her own way.
Malvado watched in silence as Totvis approached from a few buildings away with a piece of parchment in its mouth. Amante wove her fingers in between his.
Melly, can I ask a favor of you?
A princess traveling across strange worlds, fixing magical conundrums is highly dangerous. If she were to meet her end in another kingdom, or worse, at the hands of the Fae, there could be war. I imagine the Draco Force and its dedication to harmony between sentient beings and the Fae would want to protect her. And who better to guard this princess than the one bearing the high-ranking title of Jeff? He attempted to hold back a chuckle, and she lightly elbowed him with a large smile on her face.